The Malaxian Empire had already conquered 17 star systems before we encountered the bipedal creatures called humans. We expected them to fall quickly. Their ships were slow, their weapons crude, their technology laughably primitive compared to our crystalline armor and neural warfare systems. We didn't account for their stubbornness or their medics. I remember the day we captured her. A Terran transport ship had been disabled during our orbital assault, left adrift, bleeding air and life into the void. As boarding officer, I led the team tasked with securing the wreckage. Most of the crew had perished, some crushed by explosive decompression, others charred into shadows of their former selves. But in the medical bay, we found one survivor. She was hunched over a patient, her gloved hands shaking but still working, desperately, trying to stabilize vitals on a man who was clearly beyond saving. Her own suit was compromised, oxygen hissing out through a crack in her helmet. Yet she didn't stop. It made no sense. I raised my translator and gave the standard command. "Step away from the body. You are now property of the Malaxian Empire." She turned slowly, blood trickling from her nose, a sign of decompression trauma. Her eyes were fierce. "I'm not property," she said evenly, "and my patient isn't dead." Those were the first words she ever spoke to me. Lieutenant Alexandra Reeves, combat medic, United Earth Defense Force. She would soon become known across the Empire as the Crimson Healer. "Subdue her," I ordered, motioning to my squad. High Command preferred live specimens, but as we advanced, she held up a small device. "This ship's oxygen levels are falling fast," she said, voice hoarse but calm. "And your boarding gear doesn't filter methane properly. You're already breathing in toxic levels." I scoffed. "You're bluffing." Then one of my soldiers dropped to his knees, clutching his throat. Another started coughing, the transparent membrane around his breathing tubes flushing purple. "Environmental systems show elevated methane," someone shouted. I hesitated. "Remove helmets," I ordered reluctantly. Reeves moved with speed we hadn't expected. No attack, just precision. She grabbed a medical canister and sprayed a fine mist into the air. The burning in my throat stopped almost instantly. "Neutralizing compound," she said. "You'll live. Now let me finish saving him, unless you'd rather I let your squad choke." I stared at her, uncertain whether to be impressed or terrified. "Your patient is beyond saving," I said. She didn't even look up. "Then you clearly have a lot to learn about human medicine." Against my better judgment, I gave the order, "Stand down." 20 minutes later, the patient was stabilized, breathing. We took both prisoners, of course. That was procedure. But in my report, I noted her, Lieutenant Reeves, as valuable. I had no idea how right I was. She was sent to our research facility on Caraxes Prime, assigned as a medical resource. I was stationed there too, supervising the human captives. Her patient, Corporal James Turner, died en route. His condition worsened by our primitive containment systems. Reeves went quiet. Her grief, our scientists noted, was inefficient. "You mourn irrationally," said Chief Scientist Morax. "He wasn't an experiment," she replied, her voice like ice. "He was a person, and he died because you don't equip your ships with proper medical support." We gave her a chance to prove her value. Basic injuries among labor drones, burns, cuts, fractures, nothing critical. She treated each one like it mattered. "Why such effort for menial workers?" I asked one day, watching her set a janitor's broken fingers with delicate care. She looked up at me with those unsettling human eyes. "Because they're in pain, Commander. Do your people have a different standard for who deserves to not suffer?" "Our resources are allocated by caste, based on value," I replied. She didn't argue. She just went back to her work. But word of her spread. Whispers among the scientists, rumors among the workers, the human who healed enemies, the medic who made you question if you deserved mercy. She became more than a prisoner, more than a servant. She became a symbol, and symbols, as history has shown, even Malaxian history are far harder to control than people. She came to us in chains. She stayed by her own choice, and she changed everything. Injuries received treatment proportional to replacement cost. How efficient, she replied with that strange inflection humans call sarcasm. And what's the replacement? Cost for a commander who ignores potential, just because it comes in an unexpected form. Before I could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Emergency medical teams rushed past our room toward the laboratory section. Reeves immediately stood. "Up, what's happening?" she demanded. "Not your concern, human," I said. But my communicator was already buzzing with urgent messages. Laboratory, accident, explosion in the biological weapons division. Multiple casualties, including 3 high scientists. We need to go there. Reeves said, somehow reading the situation from my expression. "Now, this is a restricted area. Humans are not. Your medical teams can't handle trauma like this," she interrupted. "I have seen how they work. The research facility, slow, methodical. By the book, this needs battlefield medicine. Fast decisions, triage, improvisation." She was right. Though I was reluctant to admit it, our medical approach emphasized precision over speed in emergency situations. The resulting delay often meant more casualties. "You will follow my direct orders," I told her, making a quick decision. "Any deviation, and you will be executed immediately." "Sure," she replied with that unnerving smile. "Just get me there before more of your people die." The scene in the laboratory was chaos. By Malaxian standards, 17 personnel lay injured amid the smoking ruins of expensive equipment. The medical team was overwhelmed, working on the highest-ranking scientist while others moaned in pain. Reeves surveyed the situation in seconds. "Who's in charge of this medical team?" "I am," replied Senior Medical Officer Traz. "This human has no authority. Here, Commander Vazek, the human is consulting only," I clarified. "Continue your work." Reeves pointed to 3 of the injured scientists writhing on the floor. "Those 3 will die in the next 10 minutes without immediate intervention. The one you are working on is already gone." Traz's breathing tubes flared indignantly preposterous. "High Scientist Kelbar is stabilizing his chest. Cavity is completely compromised." Reeves countered. "You are wasting resources that could save those 3. Instead, how dare you?" "Question, she's right," interrupted one of the junior medics, earning glares from his superiors. "The readings indicate massive internal hemorrhaging. Survival probability is below threshold." Traz looked to me clearly, expecting me to remove the troublesome human, but something in Reeves' confident assessment made me pause. "Show us human," I said. "Finally, demonstrate your methods." What followed was a display of medical skill that would forever change how the Malaxian Empire approached battlefield. Medicine Reeves moved with astonishing speed, improvising tools from available materials, delegating tasks to shocked Malaxian medics, who found themselves obeying her crisp commands. "Pressure. Here, more coagulant. No, your biological systems are different. This will work better. Trust me." And remarkably, they did trust her. Within 30 minutes. She had stabilized all 3 of the scientists. She, identified as salvageable, scientist Kelbar, died as she predicted, but the others survived, including 2 who, by Malaxian medical standards, should have been unsavable. As we left the laboratory, the medical staff stared at Reeves with a mixture of resentment and reluctant respect. I studied her as we walked back to the prisoner quarters, noting how the blood of my species stained her hands and clothing crimson against her pale skin. "You saved valuable members of our research team," I acknowledged. "High Command will be informed of your cooperation." "I didn't do it for your High Command," she replied. "Battlefield deployment, tiredly I did it because they were suffering. And I could help a peculiar philosophy. I noted inefficient, and yet I just saved 3 of your scientists while your efficient system would have let them die." She stopped walking and faced me directly. "Your empire has amazing technology, Commander, but your medicine is medieval. You prioritize rank over survivability, protocol over innovation. It's wasteful. You would do well to guard your tongue, human." I warned her your usefulness has limits. She laughed a sound I found deeply unsettling. No, Commander, my usefulness is just beginning to show itself, and I think your empire is about to discover how valuable a human medic can be in a wear zone. I should have executed her. Then military protocol would have justified it a prisoner speaking with such insolence. But she was right. Her usefulness was just beginning. And the Malaxian Empire would never be the same because of it. Word of the miracle workers spread quickly through the facility within days. Reeves was being requested for consultations on difficult cases. Within weeks, she was teaching improvised trauma techniques to junior medical officers, all while remaining officially a prisoner of war. The human has created an unexpectedly profitable situation, noted Governor Persack during our monthly assessment. Mortality rates in the facility have decreased by 14%. She is still dangerous. I cautioned her, loyalty remains with Earth, of course. Agreed the governor, but loyalty can be redirected with proper incentives. The human values preserving life above all else, we can use that and use it. We did the next phase of Reeves' journey with us began with her first deployment to an active battle zone. The contested moon of Terrace IV, where our forces were locked in brutal combat with a human military outpost. You will treat our wounded soldiers, informed her as we prepared. To board the transport, demonstrate the same skills you showed at the research facility, and your status will be elevated further. Reeves regarded me with those unnervingly direct eyes, and if I refuse, then you die, and we find another human medic to replace you. She nodded, slowly. At least you are honest, Commander. But let's be clear about something. I will treat your wounded because they are wounded, not because you are threatening me. The day that changes is the day you will regret having me around. I dismissed her warning as typical human bravado. The Crimson Healer was valuable, yes, but ultimately just another tool of the Malaxian Empire. I had no idea that I was delivering to the battlefield the most terrifying weapon either side had yet encountered. Terrace IV was a nightmare of mud and blood. The humans had established defensive positions in the mining complexes that honeycombed the moon's surface, forcing our troops into brutal close quarters combat. By the time our transport landed at the forward command, post-casualty rates had reached 23%, an unacceptable figure by Malaxian standards. Field Marshal Drenak greeted us with obvious skepticism. This is the miracle worker. A human female, barely larger than a juvenile Maxian size, is rarely correlated with medical skill, Reeves remarked casually as she surveyed the makeshift field hospital. Though your medical tense organization suggests you believe otherwise, Dren's breathing tubes constricted dangerously. Watch your tone, prisoner. I will watch. My tone when you watch your wounded, she replied, pointing to the overcrowded recovery area. You are mixing trauma categories. Respiratory injuries should be separated from exoskeletal damage. Cross-contamination is killing your soldiers as surely as human weapons. But before Drenak could respond, an explosion rocked the compound. The ground trembled beneath our feet as alarms blared. Human artillery strike, shouted a communications officer. Direct hit on southern perimeter, multiple casualties incoming. Drenak turned to his medical chief. Prepare for incoming wounded. Priority to officers and specialized units. Reeves stepped forward. That's exactly why you're losing soldiers. Triage should be based on survivability, not rank. This is not your decision. Human, Dren snarled. Actually, I interjected, surprising myself. High Command has granted the human authority over medical protocols during this trial period. Drenak's eyes narrowed, but another explosion cut short his objection. Within moments, the first wave of wounded soldiers poured into the neutral medical station medical tent. The scene rapidly descended into controlled chaos. Reeves moved with practiced efficiency, her hands steady as she assessed each injury. This one first, tension, pneumothorax. In the secondary lung chamber, you prepare a vententral decompression. You start plasma replacement. Move. The Malaxian medics hesitated, looking to their chief for confirmation. He reluctantly nodded, and they scrambled to follow Reeves' instructions. What happened over the next 6 hours would become legendary in Malaxian military history. Reeves transformed the disorganized field hospital into an efficient trauma center. She improvised treatments for injuries our medics had deemed untreatable, salvaged. Limbs that would have been amputated and reduced the mortality rate by 60% in a single shift. But it was what happened during the second human artillery barrage that truly changed everything. We are receiving reports of a new chemical agent announced. A communications officer in known composition. 3 squads down with respiratory failure. The medical chief palled visibly. Unknown agents require quarantine protocols. We cannot risk contamination of the command post. Reeves elbow deep in a soldier's chest cavity looked up sharply. You are going to abandon your own troop's standard protocol. The chief replied stiffly until the agent is identified and neutralized. Exposure. Risks must be minimized. Bullshit, Reeves muttered, using a human exploit of our translators couldn't properly convert. Commander Vizek, I need a transport to the affected area. Absolutely not, Dren intervened. The prisoner remains contained within the medical facility, while your soldiers suffocate. That's not very Malaxian of you, Reeves challenged, her eyes flashing with that dangerous intensity I'd come to recognize. I have studied human chemical weapons extensively. I can identify and likely neutralize whatever they are. Using made a quick calculation. If she succeeded, it would be a significant victory. If she failed or attempted escape, she would die either way. The Empire would not lose. I will escort her. Personally, I decided, ignoring Dranak's protest of full containment protocols. 20 minutes later, we arrived at the forward position. The scene was grotesque even by war standards. 24 Malaxian soldiers lay convulsing. On the ground, their breathing tubes swollen shut. Skin turning a sickly yellow. Reeves knelt beside the nearest victim, examining him with her portable scanner nerve agent specifically designed for Malaxian respiratory systems. Clever, it targets the filtration membranes. Can you treat it? I demanded. Better. She smiled grimly. I can reverse engineer it. Over the next hour, I watched as Reeves not only treated the seeds of revolution-affected soldiers, but collected samples of the agent. By the time we returned to the command post, she had developed both a treatment protocol and, more impressively, a countermeasure. Your breathing membranes absorb certain compounds directly, she explained to the astonished medical staff. This neutralizing agent can be dispersed as an aerosol. Anyone exposed will be temporarily protected against the human weapon, Field Marshal Dren personally observed as the treatment was administered. To a test group, when all of them recovered without complications, his attitude toward the human medic noticeably shifted. Your service to the Empire will be recognized, he told her stiffly. Perhaps there is value in your species beyond simple labor. Reeves just nodded, too exhausted to offer one of her cutting remarks. But I noticed something in her eyes as she watched the recovered soldiers return to their units, a calculating look that should have warned me what was coming next. The breakthrough came 3 days later. A major human offensive had been repelled, but at heavy cost as our forces pursued the retreating humans. Reeves approached me with an unusual request. I want to treat the human wounded, she said bluntly. Out of the question, I replied immediately. Your skills belong to the Empire. Now, the Geneva Conventions require medical treatment for all wounded combatants, she insisted. Even your Empire has signed interstellar treaties on warfare conduct. Prisoners are treated according to value. I reminded her standard protocol. There's nothing standard about this situation, she countered. Look, I have proven my value to you. I have saved hundreds of your soldiers. Now I'm asking for one concession. Let me establish a neutral medical station for all wounded. I should have refused. Military doctrine was clear. Yet something in her argument resonated with me, perhaps because I'd seen firsthand how her unorthodox approaches yielded results. I will consult with Field Marshal Dranak, I said finally. No promises. To my surprise, Dranak approved the request, though with significant restrictions. The propaganda value alone is worth the experiment, he reasoned. Showing the humans we can be merciful may undermine their resistance. The neutral medical station was established in a small valley between the opposing front lines. He worked with the ancient human symbol for medical neutrality, a red cross on white background. Reeves worked tirelessly, treating wounded from both sides. Without distinction, word spread quickly among the human forces. Soon their medics began, approaching the neutral zone cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as they realized the ceasefire was being honored. This is how medicine should work. Reeves told me one evening as we watched Malaxian and human medics working side by side, healing shouldn't recognize battle lines. An impractical philosophy for wartime, I observed. Is it? She gestured to the medical tent. Your medics are learning techniques they never would have developed on their own. The humans are learning about Malaxian physiology. Both sides benefit, she was right of. Course, the exchange of medical knowledge was yielding unexpected benefits. Malaxian recovery rates. The hunt begins, improved dramatically as human techniques were adapted to our physiology. Even Dren was impressed by the results. But what none of us realized, what I failed to see, despite all my military training, was that Reeves was playing a much deeper game. It began with small things, wounded human soldiers who should have died somehow, stabilized Malaxian troops who recovered suspiciously quickly, messages passed in medical code. Between human medics at the time, I attributed the anomalies to improved techniques and dismissed the security reports. Then came the night that changed everything. A massive explosion rocked the Malaxian command post. The initial reports indicated a catastrophic equipment failure, but I knew better. This was sabotage. I rushed to the neutral medical station only to find it abandoned. Reeves was gone along with 6 human medics and, most alarmingly, 3 Malaxian medical officers who had worked closely with her. Find them. Drenak roared when I reported the situation. This was her plan all along. The medical knowledge, the neutral zone, all to infiltrate our ranks. The truth, as always, was more complex. We captured one of the fleeing Malaxian medics. 2 days later, his testimony chilled even Dren's battle. Hardened soul, the human showed us what we have become. The medic said, his voice steady. Despite the torture he had endured, our medical protocols are based on efficiency, not compassion. We let the lower castes suffer because they are deemed less valuable. She showed us another way. Treason. Drenak spat you. Betrayed the Empire for an enemy's philosophy. No, the medic replied. For a better philosophy. The human didn't just treat bodies. She treated minds. She listened to the grunt soldiers, the ones you discard like broken equipment. They began to trust her. Then they began to question. The implications were staggering. Reeves hadn't just been healing bodies. She'd been sowing dissent, spreading dangerous ideas about equality and compassion that threatened the very foundation of our hierarchical society. But the situation deteriorated rapidly after that reports came in from multiple fronts of Malaxian medical staff implementing unauthorized protocols, treating lower caste soldiers with the same priority as officers, sharing restricted medical knowledge with captured humans, but even refusing direct orders to abandon wounded during retreats. My command was furious. Drenak was relieved of command. I was tasked with hunting down the source of this medical insurgency. Lieutenant Alexandra Reeves, now known throughout both human and Malaxian forces as the Crimson Healer. Though the hunt lasted months, we tracked her through 3 star systems as she moved between battle zones, always one step ahead of our forces. Wherever she went, the pattern repeated, improved medical care for all ranks, followed by questioning of military authority, followed by small but significant acts of rebellion. When we finally cornered her on the forest moon of Alice, I expected to find her commanding a rebel medical unit. Instead, final confrontation, we discovered something far more dangerous, a full-fledged field hospital, where Malaxian and human wounded were being treated side by side with no distinction of rank or species. Commander Vazek, she greeted me calmly as my troops secured the facility. I have been expecting you, Lieutenant Reeves, I replied, maintaining formality. Despite the circumstances, you are charged with espionage, sabotage, and inciting rebellion against the Malaxian Empire. Interesting charges, she observed, is healing the wounded. Considered sabotage, now is teaching compassion, classified as rebellion. You know exactly what you have. Donai accused you have undermined the foundational principles of our society. Your society was already undermined by its own contradictions. She countered, you claim to value efficiency, yet you waste potential based on arbitrary caste distinctions. You claim military superiority, yet your medical practices were medieval before I arrived. I didn't create this situation, Commander, I just exposed it. I signaled my troops to take her into custody, but to my shock, they hesitated, their breathing tubes fluttered with uncertainty. One of them, Sergeant Kravix, actually stepped between me and Reeves. Commander, he said stiffly, the prisoner has saved 17 members of our unit, including my clutch brother. Military protocol requires consideration of significant service to the Empire. I stared at him in disbelief. Step aside, Sergeant. That's an order with respect, sir. I cannot comply with that order. It was happening again, right in front of Meath. Same subversion that had spread through our medical corps was now infecting my own troops. This is why your superiors fear me, Reeves said quietly. Not because I'm a brilliant medic. There are better doctors than me, on both sides of this war. They fear me because I treat everyone as equally worthy of care, and that idea is more dangerous to your empire than any weapon. You won't succeed, I told her, though my conviction was, weakening the empire has stood for 0 years. I don't need to succeed completely, she replied with that unsettling smile. I just need to plant. The seeds of change. Look around you, Commander. It's already happening, and it was throughout the facility. I could see Malaxian soldiers, not just medics, but combat troops, working alongside humans, peace negotiations, sharing food, exchanging stories, treating each other as equals. The barriers of species and rank had dissolved in this small pocket of the galaxy. High Command would call it contamination, treason, a violation of the natural order. But standing there, seeing the respect in my troops' eyes as they looked at this human medic, I couldn't help wondering if she was right. What do you want, Reeves? I asked. Finally, peace talks, she said, simply not. Surrender, neither side would accept that. But negotiations, this war has gone on long enough, and both sides are suffering needlessly. You overestimate your influence. I scoffed. One rogue medic cannot end an interstellar conflict. One rogue medic, no. She agreed. But thousands of converted soldiers from both sides, medical corps who refuse to prioritize officers over grunt supply chains, disrupted by workers who suddenly question why they are supporting a war that kills their own kind, that could end a conflict. The worst part was, she wasn't wrong. Reports had been flooding in 4 weeks about disruptions throughout the Empire, all traced back to her influence. The Crimson Healer had become more than a person she'd become, a movement. I made the hardest decision of my military career that day. Instead of arresting Reeves, I opened a direct channel to High Command, and with her standing beside me, proposed immediate ceasefire negotiations. The war didn't end that day or even that year, but it changed. Zones of medical neutrality spread throughout the conflict areas. Prisoner exchanges became common. Treatment protocols were standardized across both forces, and slowly, painfully, the killing diminished 5 years later as I sat across from Reeves. At the formal peace conference, I finally asked the question that had haunted me since our first encounter. Did you plan this from the beginning? From that first moment on your damaged ship when you spoke about methane poisoning? She laughed, that same unnerving sound I'd first heard years ago, though now it seemed less threatening. Plan to be captured by aliens and transform their society through medical ethics. No, Commander. I just did what any good medic does, identified the disease and treated it as best I could. And what? The legacy of the Crimson Healer disease was that I asked, genuinely curious, the belief that some lives matter more than others. She replied simply, the most dangerous pathogen in the galaxy. The treaty was signed the next day. The Malaxian Empire didn't fall, as many had feared. Instead, it transformed slowly, painfully, with many setbacks, into something different, something that retained its strength while incorporating new ideas about value and compassion. As for Lieutenant Alexandra Reeves, the Crimson Healer, she established the first Interseas Medical Academy on the neutral world of New Geneva. Rumor has it that even high command sends their young there to study, though they would never publicly admit it, and I became an instructor at that same academy. Not because I have embraced all of Reeves's radical ideas, but because I've seen firsthand how dangerous it is to underestimate the power of healing and the even greater power of treating every being as worthy of care and the most feared healer alive taught both humans and Malaxians the same crucial lesson. True healing isn't just about mending bodies. Sometimes it's about healing entire civilizations, one radical act of compassion at a time.